Hey guys, now I meant to review this movie yesterday, I just didn't get the chance to. I was at work and I was very busy. I'm sorry about that, guys. But I knew I would watch this today, and finally I've seen it. I know this is a bit delayed because obviously this movie came out last week, or that's the reason why I'm reviewing these movies. But of course, because I reviewed Ghostbusters, in this video I will be reviewing the 1989 sequel to Ghostbusters known as Ghostbusters 2. Now, I have an interesting story about Ghostbusters 2 because here's the thing. I've seen this movie before. I have. I told you guys when I reviewed Ghostbusters, I didn't watch Ghostbusters first. I watched Ghostbusters 2. I don't really know why. Something just, when I first watched this movie, something just drew me into this movie that Ghostbusters didn't draw me into. And I don't know what it was exactly, why I watched this movie before Ghostbusters. I thought it was a very, honestly, looking back, it was a really strange choice. I don't know why I decided to, watch this movie before Ghostbusters. But I did, and I knew going into this that I was probably going to be a little bit disappointed because, of course, I've seen it before, and at the time I loved it. At the time I loved it. I thought it was a very good movie. I really did enjoy it. But again, I was also very young. I was a kid, and what's great is watching movies back when you're a kid and then watching them again when you're much older and not much older, but just a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and that's something I've loved doing with a lot of these reviews. Some of these reviews I've done are movies I've watched before. And Ghostbusters 2, I knew going into this I was going to be a bit let down. I'm like, this is not going to be good as I remember. It's going to be silly. It's going to be stupid. And I will admit, I don't think Ghostbusters 2 is as bad as everyone says it is. I'm going to say that right off the bat. I don't think Ghostbusters 2 is a terrible sequel by any means, or is it even a mediocre sequel? In fact, I think this is a pretty good sequel, but unlike the first movie, this has a lot more problems than the first movie does, and unfortunately, it's very weighed down by that, and I'll talk about that. But let's get to the plot of Ghostbusters 2, which the plot of this movie is a little bit more confusing than the first one. In fact, there are a bunch of different things going on in this movie, and that's one of the problems here, is that there's tons of things going on. Basically, after Ghostbusters, the entire gang is split up, we find out, mainly because of all the property damage that they caused in the first movie, and also because there are people who are believing that the Ghostbusters are irrelevant, that they just don't exist anymore, and they're not existent anymore. People just mock them, they think they're a mockery and everything. They think they're a joke pretty much, and we see that they've all kind of gone their separate ways, but they're pulled back in when Dana Barrett, Sigourney Weaver's character, now has this son, Oscar, and weird things start to happen to Oscar, and this gets the Ghostbusters to basically come back together and reform, and basically try to figure out if they can still be that great team that they were in the first movie. And that basically is the plot of Ghostbusters 2. There's a lot more other things going on that I will talk about, some which I care about, some which I didn't, but let's talk about this movie first, because just like the first one, I am going to talk about the cast. Now, if you guys saw my review of the first one, I said the best thing about the first one, I think, was the chemistry between all four of the guys. And I was a bit worried going into this that the chemistry wasn't going to be as good. And I definitely will say that that is kind of half the case. Three of these guys, I think, do a very good job. Now, let's talk about Bill Murray here as Peter Venkman, because I said before that he was my favorite part of the first one. And in this, I really love his character still. I still think he's a really great character. There are a few, I think, missteps with his character, because his character is a little bit underwritten. There's this side of him that he still has that sort of pursuing Dana, and that's really what he wants to do, but he's grown a little bit more cocky, and I want to see them explore it a little bit more, and they really didn't explore it in the way I wanted them to. He now has this whole TV show thing he's doing. That kind of goes away after a little bit, and they don't really do much of anything with it. But probably my favorite aspect of Bill Murray in this movie, honestly, was seeing him pursue Dana, because he actually is kind of successful in this movie. You actually are kind of rooting for these two to possibly be together, and he actually has really good chemistry with Sigourney Weaver in this movie. I thought that was probably one of the best aspects of this movie. Obviously, seeing him reform the Ghostbusters is good, but that was actually my favorite stuff, is the stuff between him and Sigourney Weaver. I thought he did a really good job. We love what he did here. He had some very funny lines, definitely just as usual, and I like what he did here. Dan Aykroyd, I thought, was good here. Wasn't as good as he was in the first movie, but I still thought he was pretty good here. He's a bit awkward at times, definitely will say that, but I think for the most part, he was definitely really good. And I think out of all four of the guys, he seemed like the one that was most, he was like the one that got right back into it. Like for me, he seemed like the one that it seemed like he never left this character. He got right back into it. He absolutely loved this role, and he just got right back in the character of Ray Stantz, and I really did love seeing that. I like the way that he's kind of become friends with Dana after what's happened with Peter and everything. I think that's very, after them going their separate ways, I think that's definitely very well done. Harold Ramis really surprised me in this movie, though, I gotta say, as his character, because as you guys know, wasn't the hugest fan of him in the first one. I just didn't think he was that funny. Here, I actually thought he was funnier. He actually has this great bit where he goes to Dana's house and has this whole monologue about how he never had toys as a kid and all this stuff. I mean, it's a very funny scene. I actually thought he did a very good job, and he had some really good deadpan humor, and he actually did make me laugh in this movie. That's something I really did love. Harold Ramis, I thought, worked really well here, and those three guys work very well together. I thought overall they were very good. My main thing with this movie is Ernie Hudson. Ernie Hudson, if you want to talk about random in this movie, he feels like he comes out of nowhere. I mean, he's in a scene in the beginning of the movie, but then when the team is reformed, it's only the three of them, just like the first movie. I'm like, why are we copying the first movie? Why isn't Ernie Hudson part of this? And then randomly, when the Ghostbusters reopen, he's back. There's no explanation of how. There's no explanation of why. There's no, there's no, just catching up with him or anything. We don't know anything he's been up to, and his character to me just felt very random. He's not really that funny in this movie either, and when he's in the movie, it just feels a bit broken. I don't really know. I understand, obviously, he had to be in here, but I don't really know why they didn't give him a backstory or what he's been up to, because he's like the one that we don't know what the hell he's been up to. He just comes in, and then he's back in. It just felt very strange that Ernie Hudson just randomly came back in this movie, and that, to me, just felt very weird. So, I don't really know why Ernie Hudson was back here. Really did ruin a lot of the movie. It's not my main thing with the movie, but the guys' chemistry in the movie, it is a bit broken, because you can tell that some of them definitely want to be there more than others. At this point, Bill Murray's character had skyrocketed. He was on a roll at this point, and while he's in the movie, you don't feel that he's as close with these four guys, definitely, which is understandable, but I just feel that he was the one that he didn't feel like he was nearly as close. Dan Aykroyd seemed like he was the one that got right back into it, and I think the best scenes actually, but for Dan Aykroyd, is his interplay with Harold Ramis. Their stuff is great. It was actually very funny. I was laughing quite a lot, surprisingly. But Bill Murray, I don't think his stuff was the best stuff in the movie. I think actually, like I said, his best stuff was with Sigourney Weaver. Which, let's jump into Sigourney Weaver, because damn does she have a lot more to do in this movie. I mean, she had stuff to do in the first one. Most of the first one, though, was her possessed. She was possessed for, like, a good half of that movie. Here, she really gets to do a lot more as this character of Dana Barrett. And I really like what we saw of her here. We saw that she's a really good mother. We see that she's really cared for Oscar, and that she was married to this guy, but he took off, and she's become, like, a violinist. And, like I said, I think the interplay between her and Venkman is some of the best stuff in this movie. I really loved Bill Murray, just trying to woo her over, and it actually seems like he's doing pretty well. You can see that he's kind of wishing this was the life he would have had. There's a great bit where they have to go to his apartment and they have to live there, and it's actually really cute. I like their scene scare. I thought they worked well together. My problem is it just doesn't add up to anything. Like, it seems like they started in the first half of this movie, and then any sort of romantic stuff between them, it goes away in the last act of this movie, and it just kind of goes away, and they don't really talk about it after. It just felt really weird that it just randomly went away. They don't talk about it, they don't discuss it, it's kind of just gone, and their stuff was probably some of my favorite stuff in the movie. They're very funny together, they work very well, and even more so than in the first movie. The first movie was kind of irritating her, but I really like what they did in this one. I thought they worked very well together, and it just, like I said, it kind of went away. I mean, the stuff with her, Oscar the baby is like one of the main central plots of this, but their whole romantic stuff just kind of went away after the end of, the second act of this movie, and it was just really strange, because it seemed like they were really trying to develop a genuine relationship between these two, and then just kind of goes away, and I didn't really understand why they had to do that. It was one of my favorite parts of the movie, and then it just went away. It was just very bizarre to me, and I found that to be very strange. I mean, I'm guessing that he ends up with Dana in the end, but it's never discussed again after a conversation in this movie. It's just really weird the way they did that, and it was just, again, very underwritten. But if there's anyone that I think is giving the most awkward performance in this movie, the one that really seemed like they didn't want to be here, or the one they seemed like didn't even really need to be here, is Rick Moranis, who it is a lot for me to say that Rick Moranis was not that great in this movie, because like I said, I think he was the funniest in the first movie. I mean, he had me in tears in the first movie. I thought he was hilarious, really, and here, I don't know what the fuck they were doing with him. I don't know why he was here in this movie. It seemed like the only reason he was here is because they wanted to get everyone back, just like Ernie Hudson. They wanted to get everyone back, and he really, I had a hard time really trying to figure out what they were trying to do with this character, because first, he's their lawyer who's trying to represent them and show that they're innocent and show that all the paranormal stuff is happening again. Then he has this weird romantic subplot with Annie Potts, and then, just like the romance with Sigourney Weaver, he goes away. He doesn't really do much of anything in this movie. You know, he does a few things here and there, but there really was no reason, I think, to bring his character back. In fact, I don't really know why he was back in this movie. It felt very strange that they brought someone like Rick Moranis back. Don't get me wrong, I don't think he was bad here, but it just felt very strange that he was back here. I don't really know why they had to bring him back. He didn't really serve much of a purpose in this movie. And out of everyone, I honestly think he gave a pretty bad performance. I really was not a huge fan of what he did here. I really thought he was a lot funnier in the first movie. And I thought he was the one that had left Dana. I thought those two, I thought it was his baby. Because remember, they have sex in the first movie. I thought that it was his baby, but apparently it wasn't. He's still in the movie. I don't know what the hell he's doing here, but he's in the movie. And, yeah, so again, this was his last Ghostbusters appearance ever, because I heard he does not make a cameo in the new one, obviously because he went to retirement for like forever, but again, it's just really sad that this is what happened to Rick Moranis. I mean, he was a very good actor, and then he's in this, and he just doesn't really seem like he wants to be here. I mean, at this point, he was kind of fading a little bit, but it just didn't really seem like Rick Moranis really wanted to be here that much. It didn't seem like he had much to do here, and for me, I don't think they gave him nearly enough to work with than they did in the first movie, and that's really what worked for me. It's so much to work with, and here's the thing. His character, you know, of Louis, he's supposed to be awkward, but in this movie, it doesn't come across as funny awkward. It just comes across as awkward. It comes across as awkward, comes across as weird, it comes across as I don't want to be here, and I definitely saw that throughout this entire movie. And then there are a couple of new characters in this movie. This movie actually has a full-fledged villain, and I think he was pretty good. Definitely, I like what he did here. But I really liked, out of all new characters, Harris Yulin as the judge. I thought he was very funny, definitely, especially what happened to him a little bit later in the movie, which I'll get into. But let's talk about the directing here by Ivan Reitman, because I'm glad that they obviously got him back. It's good that they did get him back. But I don't think that his tone is as well executed as it was in the first movie. The first movie, well, you know, was a very simple concept. They had to bust some ghosts to take down, you know, some ghosts and everything, and to save the world. That's basically what they had to do. They had to save New York from everything. But here it's a lot more complex. There's a lot more stuff going on here. There's like some courtroom drama stuff going on. You got everyone trying to, you know, get back together again. You got what everyone's doing, and it just doesn't all work. It wasn't nearly as funny as the first one was. There are definitely some funny parts in this movie. I definitely will say that. But I don't think the movie was nearly as funny as the first one was. And I don't think the ghosts work as well either. I mean, there's a lot more random ghosts in this movie, and they just don't do much of anything. And I think that's really, I think Ivan Reitman just really, he tried to do way too much with this movie, and his tone was very jumbled. Sometimes it's a romance movie, sometimes it's a comedy, and it just doesn't all work for me. I didn't think it worked as well as they wanted to. The screenplay here, Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd, I think they had some good ideas, definitely. And again, they did write the screenplay, and you can definitely tell, because like I said, they are the two that felt like they wanted to be there the most, because again, they wrote the screenplay. But, to me, I just felt like they had a lot of good ideas, but it just didn't all go together. Like, there was a whole subplot going on where people don't believe that these ghosts are actually back and that the Ghostbusters have a purpose anymore, and it really doesn't make any sense. I mean, after everything that happened in the first movie, you really don't think the ghosts exist anymore? That just didn't really make much sense to me, and it really didn't do much of anything, because exactly in that same scene, the ghosts come back and everyone sees in the courtroom. So I don't understand what the point was with that plot, really. You have the whole romance going on with Sigourney Weaver and Bill Murray. It doesn't really add up to anything. And then you also have a legit villain in this movie, which I did think was kind of cool, but again, he just doesn't add up much to anything. He's not really much of a threat, and you barely see him in the movie. Like, you see him kind of in some scenes, but the scenes that he's in, it feels like a completely separate movie. I mean, everything that we got with him, until the climax at least, felt like a completely separate movie. It did not feel like Ghostbusters. It felt like something that was way different than Ghostbusters, and I didn't get that Ghostbusters feel like I did in the first movie. The first movie was just fun, and it knew it didn't have to take itself too seriously. And this movie didn't take itself too seriously either, but I just think that it tried to do quite a few more things than it really could. The cinematography here I actually think is so great. I think it holds up very well today, except for, of course, you guys know the climax of this movie with the Statue of Liberty scene. Yes, there are a bit more, they did a bit more things in this movie that are implausible, but here's the thing for me with that. This is a movie where ghosts exist, and we are trying to avenge ghosts with proton packs. I mean, it's not really the most realistic film. So, for me, the fact that they go in the Statue of Liberty, that didn't really hurt me. That was probably one of the more fun parts of the movie. I really did enjoy that. I thought that was actually a lot of fun they did there. And the ghosts still look good. Just like the first one, I think the ghosts look pretty good. There isn't as good as a ghost as the Stay Puft Marshmallow. I was hoping he'd come back in this movie. Unfortunately, he doesn't. And he was like one of the best parts of the first movie, so it was kind of sucked that he wasn't here. The score in this movie, I'm going to say it straight up, you can definitely tell that time has passed in this movie, because there is a lot more rap music in this movie, and it feels very out of place. It just doesn't go here at all. There's a rap version of Ghostbusters in here. Of course, they do Ray Parker Jr.'s original version, but they do a rap version. They do all these different songs, and it was kind of shit, honestly. The score really was not that great. I don't think the score worked very well at all. I think the music was fine. There's a bit more of a playful score that they had here, but the score I thought was just okay, honestly. I think the score was a lot better than the first one. The editing here is very choppy. I'm going to say that right off the bat. The editing here is very choppy, especially, and I'd say the first act. Things get a lot more, once they actually start the Ghostbusters again, things get a lot more slowed down, and once you actually get into it, I was into it. But then when the third act happened, I honestly started to lose interest a little bit. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. This movie is boring at times, definitely. Or some times where I was starting to tune out. I'm like, I'm not really into this, because it's not the most interesting concept. When there's not a lot going on in this movie, it's not really all that interesting, and I'll definitely say that right off the bat. There are a lot of things here that are not that interesting. There are a lot of things that are quite boring. There are a lot of things I definitely did tune out a little bit. So those really are the main problems I have, really. I mean, like I said, I don't think the movie's as bad as everyone says it is. But overall, for the most part, I'm not going to lie, I did enjoy Ghostbusters 2. Obviously, it's not nearly as good as Ghostbusters. I think that movie is just so much better than this, and this movie, I think they just tried to get away with a little bit too much. I think there was too much than they could chew. They bit off too much, and a lot of the things they start in this movie just don't really add up much to anything. But I still had a good time with Ghostbusters 2. When this movie's fun, it's a lot of fun, and when this movie is good, it's really good. And because of that, I am going to give Ghostbusters 2 a 3.5 out of 5 or a B-. Like I said, this movie definitely has a great deal amount of problems, but I don't think it's a terrible sequel. It's not the worst sequel ever made. It's not one of the worst sequels I've ever seen by any means. It's not even a mediocre sequel. In fact, I think this is a pretty good sequel. Just a lot of the ideas they had were very half-assed, and they are nearly as entertaining and nearly as fun as the original one was. But I still would recommend, if you've seen the first one, I honestly would recommend to see this movie, because it's not terrible. I mean, I don't think it's going to change your opinion of the Ghostbusters at all. I think you'll still think the same thing after watching this movie. It doesn't denounce the Ghostbusters in any way. It doesn't try to retcon anything. So honestly, I would recommend you see it. I don't think it's bad, and I definitely would recommend checking it out. Although, just know when you see it, that's definitely not going to be as good as the original 1984 classic. So far, guys, remember Ghostbusters 2. Let me know what you guys thought of this movie. You have seen it. Now I am officially caught up to Ghostbusters. I already saw Ghostbusters 2, like I said, a few times. But, now I can watch the remake whenever I get a chance. I will watch it. I don't know when, which is actually a reboot. It's not a remake. It's a reboot. And let me know what you guys thought of this movie. You have seen, left your thoughts in it. Do you agree with the things I said, with, like, some of the characters not feeling interested? For me, like I said, Ernie Hudson, Rick Moranis, that stuff just, they didn't really feel like they need to be there. But let me know what you guys thought of this movie. Left your thoughts in it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for the series premiere of Stranger Things. I know you guys wanted me to review it, and I will review my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.